Today, we're going to look at the differences in view between Jesus and Seneca, and we're going to find out how their views on life should matter a lot to us as we live in this modern world. Let's get started. Welcome back, and thank you so much for visiting this channel. Before we get started, please take a moment to support by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing to this channel. We are participating in an experiment to see if we can grow this channel to 1 million subscribers in just 1 year, and your support will help us meet that goal. We want to demonstrate to YouTube that we're able to create channels that are focused on biblical content, the study of Jesus Christ, and the proclamation of Jesus Christ. And we want the world to take us very seriously in this endeavor. And so your support will help us in breaking the YouTube algorithm. And so please do that and help us grow this channel so we can meet our goal. Now, today we're going to be talking about the differences between Seneca and Jesus Christ. And it is a very interesting thing to think about because these two individuals lived during the same time, and they both represented two schools of thought that were very popular during their own time. Jesus represented the traditional Hebrew school of thought, and Seneca represented the Greek philosophical school of thought. And if you read the New Testament, you'll see that these two schools of thought are represented in nearly every book of the Bible. This was especially present in Paul's letters, who saw these two different school of thoughts forming congregations and communities. And the challenge would have been, how do we reconcile the differences, and how do we create a community that is centered on the teachings of Jesus Christ that do deviate in many respects from the traditional Hebrew school of thought and from the more popular and modern, or should I say dominant, Greek school of thought. So it's a very challenging thing, and I see that we are faced with some of those same issues. Now, if you think about Seneca, who was probably one of the greatest Stoics that we have ever known in history, Seneca had this idea that life must be well lived. And the interesting thing about that is we should not intend on living unless we know what it means to live. There's a quote that he wrote in Moral Letters that was incredibly insightful to this point. He wrote, "You are afraid of dying, but come now, how is this life of yours anything but death?" You see, Seneca understood that the idea of living requires a person to master themselves, because in this idea of self-mastery is also the understanding that life has dealt to us an element of fate that cannot be avoided. There's no escaping fate. You are supposed to live a life accepting the fact that there are going to be problems, there's going to be sadness, there's going to be some sort of pain, there's going to be tragedy, but instead of trying to avoid these things, what you should do is you should learn to just deal with them. That's the mastery that one is supposed to embrace as a human being. And if you cannot find the ability to master the tragedies of life, then the solution is not to keep on trying, or even not to find some element of peace or comfort, but rather it is to just simply take your life. Now, this is important because when we hear about Stoicism, we don't take into consideration the fact that there is no hope in this school of thought. You see, the natural response would be, where's the hope in all of this? If I master myself, is there any hope that I can avoid tragedy? Is there any hope that I can avoid the pain that I'm suffering, or I can even overcome it? Well, Stoicism would say you can master yourself with the intentions of bearing with the tragedy, or bearing the tragedy well. You can master yourself to the point where you are able to deal with whatever pain that you are supposed to deal with. And that is the key and the way of living. Now, Jesus is a bit different, because even though Jesus embraces the fact that the world is filled with pain and suffering, even though he admits and accepts the fact that even the people that he is surrounded by are dealing with terrible pains that are caused by oppressive systems and even things that they may have brought upon themselves, the solution is not to master yourself, but the solution is to sacrifice yourself. You see, this is a major difference in the school of thought as presented by Seneca and Jesus Christ. Seneca would say, master yourself. In other words, discipline yourself to the point where you can feel and take on all of these pains and all of these struggles and survive it. Jesus would say, sacrifice yourself, because in sacrificing yourself, there is hope that you will be brought back to life. This is why the idea of resurrection is so beautiful, because it's not simply the idea that if I die physically, I will get up again, but it's the idea that if I symbolically, if I as a life principle continue to sacrifice myself, there's an idea there that I will be brought back to life. That is, the more I give myself to death, the more I give myself to the opportunity to live. In Matthew 16, this very idea is presented, where Jesus is talking to his disciples and he himself is preparing to be killed. He's not preparing for suicide as Seneca or some of the other Stoics might propose, but rather he is preparing himself to be murdered. He knows it's something that he has to do. And interestingly enough, the idea of living in purpose requires him to submit himself to the will of the Father, even if that means giving his life. Now, in the process of giving his life, the question is Jesus seeing this as just one of the fates of life? Or is he seeing it as a means of establishing purpose with the hope of being rewarded for the sacrifice that he is making? You see, the difference between Christians and those who might follow the school of Stoicism is that even in sacrificing ourselves, we have hope that there is some reward for the thing that we're doing. Whereas with Seneca and Stoicism, you might give your life or you might die, but there's nothing to be gained from it. Friends, I want to say this. I think that one of the greatest things about Christianity is the fact that it is a religion, or should I say a school of thought, or even a faith that believes in the reality of hope. The fact that Jesus is here is a testament to the fact that we have a reason to hope. And when we give our life to Jesus, what we're simply saying is, I believe that the sacrifices that I will make will be worth it because I have hope in the finished work of Jesus Christ, who by example showed me how to not master myself, but sacrifice myself in every way possible. So this is beautiful to me. I'm getting a little excited here, but this is so beautiful because the idea that I can serve a God who gives me hope is a beautiful thing when considering the hopelessness of other schools of thought. Well, let's look at what Jesus says here. Jesus is preparing to give his life and die, not, a simple death as we see in the other philosophical schools where it may be poison or some other means of, quiet death. But this is going to be a brutal death. This is Jesus taking on every ounce, if you will, of struggle that we can imagine. It's painful. It's humiliating. It's dirty. It is raw. It is all of that. And Jesus is embracing it. And the reason he's embracing it is because he knows it's his purpose. And secondly, he knows there's a reward. He says there, I'm going to be killed by the teachers of religious law. And he says in verse 22, there was a person there trying to stop him from doing that. That person is one of his own disciples, Peter, saying, you can't do this, Jesus. You cannot go to be killed. We need you here in the sense, I can't let you do that. Well, notice what Jesus says to him in verse 23 of Matthew chapter 16. He says, get away from me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap to me. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's. What an interesting statement. What he's saying here is God's point of view requires me and essentially us to sacrifice ourselves. But God's point of view also includes in our self-sacrifice the opportunity to be rewarded and to have an opportunity to fulfill the purpose that he has for this creation. In other words, you get an invitation when you sacrifice yourself to participate not only in what your plans are for yourself, because your plans may not be that, but more so, what are the plans of God and how are you involved in that? You see, I keep saying this on this channel, but our view of God is so uniquely different from the comparative philosophical schools and some of the other philosophical schools that don't even align in any way, form, or fashion, that it actually impacts every single thing that we do and every single ounce of the ideas that we hold on this earth. How we view God, how we view God's role in creation and in our lives, it drastically impacts everything. So when you see Jesus here, who is the leader of this new movement, if you will, saying, listen, there's a point of view that I'm living by, and that point of view requires me to sacrifice myself. This view is even foreign to those who were the closest to Jesus Christ, and is something that they even had to wrestle with. Jesus continues and says, if any of you want to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me. Do what I do. Now, here's the thing that's interesting in verse 25. If you try to hang on to your life, that is your way of living, your way of mastering yourself, as it may be put by Seneca, you will lose it. If you try to manage your life your way, you're going to lose it, he's saying. But if you give up your life, if you sacrifice your life for my sake, you will save it. There's the hope. You see, in Seneca's school of thought, there is no hope. We just all die. In fact, the hope is, if there was anything, dying, just ending it. But with Jesus, the hope is, if I die, if I sacrifice myself to the point of death, then guess what? I gain life, because there is hope of resurrection. Okay. And that is both in terms of eternity and in terms of the ability to live as the individual that God has called us to do. In other words, there's two things we can look at here as Jesus refers to self-sacrifice. The more I give myself in this life, in this body, the more I find life. It may be killing me, if you will, to sacrifice myself, but the more I do that, the more I live. That's such a big idea philosophically. But then let's take it in terms of in a literal sense. If I die literally, resurrection doctrine, the resurrection belief states that I will live again in eternity. So we have these two different ideas working in the same teaching that resonated with these disciples in a way that we don't see in any other philosophical school, and especially not in the school of Stoicism, which is represented by, in this case, Seneca. When you talk about living your life, are you simply going to live a life that states, I can't do anything, I can't simply conquer the plight of living in a world that seems to be broken, when there's an opportunity for you to live in faith and live by hope? And even just by living in that way, you bring some sort of peace to your mind. You bring some sort of ability and power to overcome tragedy. That's the thing we're facing in this conversation. Which one will you want to? Do you want to live thinking the best I can do is try my best to master myself, and if I can't, then I'll just end it? Or will you be willing to embrace the fact that yes, it is a faith journey, but the reality is it gives you something to work with, so you can now manage through the pain and the struggle that you will face in this world, with the expectation that one day, even maybe tomorrow, you will overcome the pain that you've experienced, because faith leads to hope. And the hope that we have in Jesus Christ is not some theory, but it is a real life. It's a real life power at work in those who actually believe. That's the thing. You see, the school of thought that Jesus presents is not just a theory of unanswered questions. It's a way of life, and it is a power at work. So friends, when it comes to choosing between Seneca, who states, let's try the best we can, and if we can't get where we need to be, let's just end it, versus Jesus, who says, give yourself up daily, and the more you give yourself up, the more you will live, and the further you go in sacrificing yourself, the more you'll find life. I will choose that hope every single day of the week, because I believe that that hope is at work, and it is powerful, and it is accomplishing something in my life that will help me be able to deal with the pain of living in a dark world. There are two different thoughts. I want to leave it to you to choose today. Listen, I know this is a very interesting conversation, and I can't wait to see your comments in the box that tells me how you are processing this information. But listen, it's worth talking about. So let's dialogue about it. Let's engage, and let's go a little further into this. We'll probably talk about Seneca a little bit more, and just how he thought and how broad of his thinking was. And then we're going to compare that to Jesus Christ and see how we can find some approach to how we can live our lives today. But friends, we're out of time. I want you to please take a moment to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Please hit that notification bell. We're going to reach 1 million subscribers. It's hard to believe that we've grown as much as we have just in this short period of time, but we have a long way to go. So please engage this experiment. Please be a part of the community. Let's talk, let's dialogue, and let's grow in our faith. Until next time, thank you for watching, and God bless.